All right, let's get started. Everybody here, the entire committee, welcome everyone to the Altona Citizen Water Committee, October 3rd. It is 4:35. All committee members are present, and we have two guests with us, Matt Berry from KPMG and
Kevin Grace with GSG.
Kevin Grace with GSG. I'll just kind of start with a little why we're here today. If you all recall, we had originally gotten a scope of work and pricing from KPMG a couple weeks ago, and it was obviously over our budget, and the committee decided how do we trim that down to do the most important things we feel that can give the citizens the biggest bang for their buck and come in under budget or at budget. And there was also concerns to make sure that the review did include wastewater stuff because it's an important piece to it. So KPMG has revised the scope based on our last meeting and the request that we made. And you all should have gotten a copy of that. And members of the public, I think there's a copy there also. Mr. Berry, this committee runs very smooth and fluid. We're not really so formal. We allow people just to kind of share. This is a small, quaint group, even members of the public that, take their personal time to come out here for this important subject. We allow them to participate. It's just, as long as nobody talks over each other, we can all share their thoughts and ideas and come up with a good work product. With that said, what I'd like to do is I'll give Mr. Berry a few minutes to kind of talk a little bit about him and what he'd like to get from us, and then the committee can go from there.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you very much, Representative Santiago. My name is Matt Berry. I am a director in KPMG's State and Local Government Advisory Practice, so I help states, counties, cities, tribal organizations throughout the Southeast and around the country to really improve operations, become more efficient, understand where there are strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities within their either operations, administrative functions, things like that. Kevin, do you want to give a brief introduction as well?
Yeah, I'm the Assistant Director for Government Services Group's Orlando office, and we manage water and sewer operations around the state. We have about 130,000 connections in 14 counties. So we also do management consulting where we come in and we evaluate water and sewer systems. So we're working as a sub to KPMG.
Yeah. So where we have a lot of experience is around things like your processes, your human capital. We've done a lot of that with water and wastewater utilities, where we try to augment those skills with people who really specialize in public water and wastewater utilities that get the direct operations side of things. So for a lot of the areas, especially that were in the original scope, but I think that are still included in the revised scope that you sent out last week, I think GSG really complements us very well, and we worked together before. We did a study a few years ago with Tampa Bay Water, and one of the office managing partners in Orlando is a former KPMG alumnus, so a lot of logical work between the two firms. So we're excited to present to you with this revised scope and really get started hopefully shortly. So I have been from afar kind of keeping tabs on the committee, keeping an eye on what the committee has been discussing, particularly after we sent over the initial scope and the revised scope. Just wanted to kind of provide a little bit of background around what our thought process was when we sent over initially, particularly the first one to the second one, and I think just to clear up some potential kind of miscommunications or things like that. So we provided the first one, which was the $360,000 option. That one was, I think, typically when we come in, we didn't have a lot of detail in terms of scope compared to what we would typically see in like an RFP. Mm-hmm. So typically you would see we want X, Y, Z in a very finite level of detail. I think you guys did a good job of kind of distilling, here's the key areas that we want to understand. When we took that scope, we kind of attacked it saying we're going to go at a very fine level of detail and provide you with a very comprehensive and detailed report that'll have a lot of recommendations and a lot of observations and a lot of data analysis and a lot of very in the weeds content. I think the way that we once we understood that you had a cap budget of a couple $100,000, we said, okay, we can absolutely get you what this committee needs within that budget. And so the $199 and now $191,000 option entails is pulling things up just a little bit level of detail, where you'll still get a lot of really valuable observations and recommendations, identifying the strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats that are facing the organization from a water and wastewater perspective. But it doesn't get to a lot of a really fine level of detail that this, to be honest, this group probably doesn't need. That if this was going to be handing something that could be referenced and to the level of detail of what we would call a really detailed management audit, I don't think this group needs that. What this group needs is to say, here's where the biggest issues are within each of the functions that are included here, and that's what we tried to bring it to a level of detail to. We've done both of these before. I think the easiest way to describe this is the difference between a 200-page document and a very informative higher level, almost PowerPoint presentation. That would be the difference, if that makes sense. Happy to discuss that if that causes any issues, but I think that's the best way that we can support the city, given the experience we have and what we bring to the table, along with matching what you're looking for from a fees perspective.
I wanted to ask something, just and if you know off the top of your head,
Sure.
or find out. A lot of what we took our questions from and insight from is the Charlotte County, Florida audit
Yes.
that you did.
Yeah.
Could you tell me in comparison, just so I can gauge what finite details or what
That's
we're
the
looking
finite.
at?
That's the very
Okay.
finite level of detail. That one was, I believe, like 350 or 360,000.
Yeah,
It was almost
that's what we
identical
saw.
from a pricing perspective.
Yeah.
I think we can provide something. Was it the Edgewater one?
Yeah, we did an Edgewater one that was very high level.
Mhm.
Okay, it was like maybe a $30,000
Yeah.
analysis, and that was like, what, 20, 25 pages?
Yeah.
So you're looking at something in between those two.
Right.
Okay. Which I think, from an operations standpoint, is going to give you a lot of information about the system.
What was
which I think
what was the purpose of Edgewater?
Edgewater, we were doing it as a sub to the rate consultant who was coming in doing evaluation of the rates. And the city wanted to take a look at, a high-level look at how they were doing in permit compliance and various areas, lab testing and things like that. And their staffing.
So
we
the
looked at
city,
their staffing.
based on what you're telling me, then the city can take the analysis that's made and decide if they want to drill down after that.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
So if they identify, or someone identifies, hey, this is a key component where we have a major problem, re-engage you all, whoever, and saying, okay, how do we solve this and go deep dive? So,
Absolutely, yeah.
So it'll identify problems on key levels, and then
We might end up identifying some things that the city will actually want to explore.
Yes, absolutely.
That might need a separate study.
And I want to give you a quick little history too, because I know you did
Sure.
your work to kind of how we are here today.
Can I say one
Sure,
thing?
sure.
The only other thing I wanted to clear up, because I did listen to particularly the last meeting, the reduction of scope did not have as much to do with water versus wastewater. That it was really the pulling up a level of the detail. This one, just to confirm, the 191 version that you have now includes the revised scope that you sent last week, and it covers water and wastewater. That's all I wanted to cover, and now I'll let you.
Yeah, no, that's a great clarification. And then the committee can ask any questions. I just want to kind of give you, this was a citizen-formed committee based on the city commission. There was some attempt that we tried through my office to get the state to pay for it. It got approved in the state budget. It got vetoed by the governor, and the city decided to go on it on their own. For in terms of transparency, they formed this citizen-led committee, and we kind of ran on our own, unbiased or untouched from anybody in administration or elected, so that we give the presentation that it's not an audit or review, or audit, whatever we want to call it. I know we've had some semantics on that, but an audit that's controlled by the city. So, and
Sure.
obviously we wanted to go outside. So it's extremely important to this committee, and I think to the general public, that you operate with as much independence as possible as you go through this.
Yeah.
Because we want to give this work product not only to the city commission, but to the public to say, okay, we've taken a look, and how do we operate similar to others? Are we in the top tier, we're in the bottom tier, we're in the mid tier, those types of things.
Sure.
So that's kind of like history of why we're here, and we're trying to be very cautious of everything being as transparent as possible.
Sure, absolutely. And I think we pride ourselves on being objective. We we're not doing this with the anticipation of getting add-on work from it. We're not going to kowtow to the city to do it. We're still going to work with the city because that they're going to be able to be the ones that provide us with the information.
Sure.
They'll technically be the ones, I think, contracting us, but that doesn't mean
That's right.
that we are going to pull punches because of that. We're going to be fair, we're going to be objective, and I think we'll have the independence that this committee is looking for.
And we have a new director also that came on board, what, about 3 or 4 months ago, maybe?
For the
Yeah,
department?
4 months ago. Yeah, for the water,
Okay.
Deltona Water. And he has made some improvements that the committee has acknowledged here also that we're happy with. So
Great.
just have acknowledged that I think you have a willing partner.
Good.
That's going to be working with you as we go through this process.
That always makes it easier.
Yeah, yeah. And then committee members, any questions or concerns? Go ahead, shoot at it.
I have just a request if I can get some direction from you. I know since KPMG is here as we go along, I would really like to invite the people that are here, right, to, you know what I mean, to briefly, if they have a question for us to acknowledge it.
I'll open it up to members
Okay.
of the public, certainly will. Anybody that's here that wants to share a thought, once we get through the committee members, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
all right, very good.
Do you know how prevalent the 25% surcharge is around the state?
Pretty prevalent. I don't have exact numbers for you, but I'm a longtime city and county manager around the state before I went doing what I'm doing now. Most cities do it, so it's very easy. The statutes are set up to make it easy to do it. I mean, they can do a 25% surcharge without any justification whatsoever for it. If they're going to go over that, they can go up to 50%, but you have to have a study that supports that the costs to provide outside the city justify that. But you can do 25 up to 25 without
25, no, with the blink of an eye.
no
Yeah.
Do
justification.
most cities just go to the max of 25?
Most just do the 25% because it's easy.
Yeah.
So, and it ends up being essentially an incentive to annex.
So are you able to, as a quick follow-up, are you able to do the analysis of the feasibility of that 25% surcharge?
The feasibility, you mean whether it's necessary?
Yeah.
That may be something these guys, I think that's part of your guys' scope.
Yeah, we can.
They're looking.
Yeah,
for-
I mean, we kept that in. Yeah.
Because roughly there's, from my understanding, roughly there's approximately 9,000 people in Deltona Water District that are supporting the sewer system out of, I think, 80,000 potential customers. And those of us who are outside the city limit we're facing, last month my water bill was $308. And I know a lot of my community members who are on fixed income, they're putting up for sale signs.
Yeah.
They're running because it's just unaffordable.
So,
Go ahead.
one of my questions is actually that. The second one is, from your experience, the cities that do have that 25% charge, how many of those do actually need that 25%?
I think they vary. Like I said, my experience has been it's typically used as an annexation
Yeah.
incentive. They want the folks around there to annex into the city, and so that gives you a financial incentive to
That's what the
annex
former
in.
mayor said to me.
But there are situations where there's legitimately they have to go out further to serve those areas, and they do incur additional expenses. So I think there is a legitimate purpose in a lot of them to charge extra.
But
How far- I'm sorry, go ahead.
your experience, I don't need an exact number, like, you would say that maybe 50-60% actually do need that surcharge?
I don't really have any empirical data to share with you, just my observations over the years.
Right.
I would
I
think
think-
most could justify some additional cost.
I think once they work it into their budget, it works its way in.
Right.
But because the
As far as
statute
costs and
allows them to do
expenses.
25% without any study or analysis or whatever, most just go to do the 25%.
So how many in your experience go to annexation?
Probably, there's a mix. I don't have the empirical data, but ones I've seen, if they actually look at it, they probably don't do it because the 25% is less than the additional tax bill they're going to get from the city if they annex in. So most, if they sit down and do the numbers, decide not to annex. But
Matt, I'd like to give you, I think, a little direction on that area.
Sure.
That I think would be important to the committee. I think in that analysis is that, what would the fiscal impact be if it were, let's say, cut in half or eliminated? And what would the fiscal impact be if that dollar amount, let's say we have 2 or 3 options, were spread out amongst the entire customer base to make up that if it's $1 million, I'm making up a number, right? If it were $1 million, what would it be to the entire customer base to not have to charge people that surcharge? I think that would help you, right, Tim?
Yeah, it would
Give you a
definitely, yeah.
And then maybe give an option to the city commission to review.
And if you could do it at a 15% reduction?
So to 10,
and a
from
10%.
25 to 10?
From 25 to 15 and 10, if you could look at those hard numbers.
There's also something that needs to be said, and you guys should really get a feel for this. There's a lot of anger in relation with Deltona Water in the community for various reasons. 25%, I represent the people who are getting hit with that.
Mm-hmm.
So we are very upset with it and have been. But in general, I think there's a very negative view of Deltona Water amongst the customers. Many complaints about irregular billing. Someone recently got a bill for $20,000, and we're hoping that you guys can take a look at that and maybe help Deltona Water become more customer service oriented.
Sure.
And are you guys able to do a ride along with like a water meter?
Absolutely, yeah. We do. We literally, I was down in Fort Lauderdale yesterday and just presented a report there, and we did that with the third-party service provider that does their water meter reading. So absolutely, that would be something that we did.
One of them told me they do like 600 or 700 meters per day.
Sure.
I don't know how that's possible.
I'm trying to think of how many Fort Lauderdale did.
They're not smart meters.
No, they were.
They
You
get out of
pop
the
it
truck,
open,
yep.
and did they have like a handheld device that they?
Right.
Yeah. That's. I wouldn't say they were probably in the 300 or 400 range or so. But that was a private company that was doing it too.
Right.
I'd have to go back and look, but yeah, it's not outside their own possibility, but it does seem a little high. Yeah, go ahead.
The water treatment. Are you guys able to evaluate the chemicals? Because we've heard a lot of complaints about the water quality. It's funny, in my community, we pay $250 a month minimum for our water, but no one drinks it.
True story. It's in the city.
It's the whole city. It's not only you.
Yeah, I know. See that this is part of the.
It may be weird, but I drink it.
Yeah.
That answers a lot of questions about you, my friend.
I want to be transparent.
Yeah.
But
we would be looking at the.
quality is in the eyes of the holder. He may think it's fine. I may not. But that's
But
part
you
of.
could be closer to the plant than he is, so you're gonna get more of the taste and the.
Mm-hmm.
I guess to bring
It kills
direction
your plants, Karen.
to bring direction to that
Yeah.
is what materials or products are we using in Deltona Water, and how do our health department, I think the state testing compare? Are we in the top percentile? Are we doing good? Are we doing bad? Are we using the best possible treating mechanisms for potable water? Right. I guess that's what we would look for, right?
We
give
would
some
be
direction.
looking at the testing procedures, the lab tests. We'd be looking at the standard operating procedures.
There was some
how
question
often-
about a type of chemical, I think, that Deltona was using, whether that is the
They
norm or
changed the
not.
chemical.
From ammonia to that specific chemical.
Yeah.
So
Or
we
sorry,
would look at that.
Clorox.
Yeah.
to that.
That's something we
And I
could
think
do.
we were the only city in
I-
Volusia County
I don't know.
that, out of the 16, 17 cities that were not following, what the state guidelines or what
We'd
have
be
you.
looking at your permit compliance.
Perfect. Yeah. That's what you're talking
all
about,
those
right,
kind of
Tim?
things. So, yeah.
And I know, Santiago, you brought that up during our meetings, and just to see where we're at there.
Sure.
With the going back to the 25% real quick, do you know the last time that the city did a rate study?
Just
About
did
a
it.
year ago.
no, it was just now. It was
Just did it.
Just
Just
did
did
it.
Okay.
it. This was within 60 days.
Those numbers might be easily.
Did they just vote to-
And they've been using the
Finalize the price.
same auditing company, Stantec, for how long,
Yeah,
Santiago?
they're one of those standard
They're
firms.
pretty
Yeah. I'd say that I bring that up to say when we look, when we talk about fiscal impact, I think what we can do, we're not going to be able to do it in terms of here's what your rate would look like.
Mhm.
What we can do is say potentially here's what the impact to essentially the enterprise fund would be. That's obviously good, and that would be, there's going to be obviously impacts to the water rates. I think water rate studies can be fairly complex. That would probably be a little bit outside the scope of this in terms of what, if you drop it down from
Basic
15.
fiscal impact.
Yeah, exactly. We can do that. I think getting down to here's the impact on customer bills system wide, that would have to be beyond the scope of this one.
I have another question. In your experiences, when it comes to billing customers, how many cities around the state of Florida, roughly bill their customers using their last name before their first name? I mean, I know it sounds like a very silly question, but we actually practice that here in Deltona.
Okay.
And for example, my first name is Santiago,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of people whose last name, for example, is Santiago. And if for some reason I moved into the house that he used to live in, all my bills would be forwarded to his new property, because when we send out our water bills, it would say Avila Santiago. When the mail gets it, the mail reads first and last name. So they're not knowing that my last name is actually my first name.
Okay.
It's very confusing, but
Okay.
and it's happened to multiple people, and they've had their water shut down because
I
of
think
that.
we do it based on last name primarily, so I think that's pretty typical. We have not run into that issue as far as mailing bills and going to the wrong people because the post office looks at the names differently, but I think that's pretty standard that last name is the primary and shows up first.
So, talk to me a little bit about the human capital and management section. So, what does that process look from your point of view and from the workforce point of view?
Sure. So I would say from a human capital side of things, I'd say the number one thing you're really looking at is staffing. It's understanding, when you look at the water and the wastewater side of things, the staffing ratios, the number of people compared to, fairly standard industry standards in terms of the operating statistics that you're looking through, number of miles, all customer base, depending on what kind of function it is, you can get down to a level of detail to say you don't have enough people in this function, you have too many people in this function, so you can kind of right size the organization. I think it's looking at the training and development. It's looking at what training is provided to people. Are you in line with peers? Are there gaps? Are you monitoring your people who have to have certain compliance trainings to make sure that they are completing them on an annual or however often basis to make sure that you have people who are who have the training that they're supposed to have. And then workforce management. I've done a lot of work with this both within utilities but also within transportation. It's looking at the processes and the functions where you try to find people that can do these jobs. This is not an easy job to do. It probably doesn't pay very well, and these are difficult jobs to bring people in and keep them and recruit and retain. And how does the city go about finding and keeping the right talent? And that's a difficult thing to do.
So you will, that's what's one of my questions, I'm sorry, that, and how employee satisfaction impacts their job performance, right?
And if they're even measuring that, what we see a lot is that they don't even have a mechanism to measure that. They're not doing an annual survey of their employees. They're not tracking their retention.
Performance reviews.
So that would be an easy observation for us, is to say, whether it's performance reviews, whether it's an annual employee survey that can go down to the department or the office level. It's going through and looking at retention rates and how those compare to industry standards. All those kind of things are things that we would look at.
How will you generate that information? Will you sit down with meetings with those?
Sit down with meetings and data and data analysis. That's typically what we would do.
So it's basically going into the facility, side by sides, taking a look, looking at the business operations, day-to-day operations.
Most of the work. So when we look at field work for these kind of things, we would typically have, for this one with an 8-week project, we have a couple weeks of solid of interviews. Sit down with people, both not just at the leadership level, because I think that's the mistake a lot of people make, is they think we just go in and talk to the managers and then go about our day. We want to get down to the
Right.
frontline level and make sure that they're comfortable, make sure that they know that we're not going to attribute things to their names, things like that, so that they feel comfortable being honest with us.
So like a focus group
You talk to
or
them.
Yeah, we love doing focus groups because you get more than one perspective.
Right.
And yeah.
So once this is all done, You then make recommendations as to what needs to be implemented and everything to bring everything back up to par. At that point, are you making recommendations for consulting firms or?
Sometimes, so most of our recommendations are for stuff that the city can do itself.
Okay.
There's certain things, like for example, if the city hadn't had a rate study done in 10, 15 years, that would be a recommendation. So engage Stantec or someone like them to do a rate study. Depending on what the city's capacity is for some of these things, they may have to go out and get a consultant to help them do it. But we don't say we're not going to make recommendations only for stuff that consultants can do or stuff only that the city can do. We're going to make recommendations based on what we think is best for the city.
So you're going to put the best practices together and everything else like that and just let them know,
Yeah.
this is what you're going to need to do.
Absolutely.
As a practical question, at the end of your audit, we'll have questions answered, practical questions for our residents, like that ask this: why are my hold times so long on the phone, right? Things like that we'll be able to answer.
Typically you'd say, like, so if that's a good example. It would be, so if that's a question you'd be able to probably look at a report and say, either there's processes that are not good, your technology's outdated, or you don't have enough people. If for that specific kind of question, that would be the kind of answers that you'd see.
I guess sorry to cut you off, because I had somebody call me yesterday and told me while they were on hold, they were on hold for 20 minutes because he found out his water was going to be cut off that day. He wanted to get to someone before the water gets cut off. So that happened yesterday.
Yeah, and I think that information technology,
Do we
that's
track,
going to
do we
do a
track
whole
abandon rate? Do we
No.
track,
Nope.
average hold
You gotta
time?
have a system
Yep.
that measures those things.
No,
You
and we
don't even
don't.
know it.
Yep.
We
Right.
do
That way
not.
we know how well we're servicing.
Or is it just someone in the department
Yes.
that has a phone?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. And do you have an online portal that people can use? All these kind of questions. Yeah.
None of that stuff is captured. It's out there in Never Land, those benchmarks, because we have pointedly asked that, how many abandoned do you have? How many, and I don't know, and which leads me to my, next, just two questions. We want to make sure it's addressed in all ways possible, that we can get as close to the answer as possible. What is happening to these poor people's water bill? I just got somebody's water bill, $949, and the people have not been in the house. A little old lady had a stroke and had not been in her house for 3 months, okay, and this happened. So I'm just saying that is one of the biggest questions, and that we need answered, and I don't need you to answer that, but to point, because if you don't have a leak, there's been multiple reports, people have paid thousands of dollars, hundreds of dollars to get plumbers out there, slab leak detectors, and irrigation specialists. I'm speaking of me.
Yeah.
Dug up my yard, everything. No, it was some type of anomaly that is making everybody crazy. How has this happened? And which leads into my last point, is if you are going to specifically, I know that you're going to look at the software that's used, the Munis software, because as part of just my own personal research, I know for a fact that Tyler Technologies has had problems in the past with municipalities, glitches or overcharging or software issues, and wonder if you will look at where that points also.
As part of the information technology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, going into your question, would you guys be willing to take a look at some of those bills?
I think we can do a fairly limited amount. We can look at some as kind of samples to kind of guide
So
us.
you know what we're talking about when we
Right.
talk about these high water bills and things.
Right. Yeah. And this is, as I said, I was down at Fort Lauderdale delivering our report there yesterday, and unfortunately, it's a difficult thing to prove a negative. It's hard to go in and say here is what caused any single person's
Bill to go
up.
Are
It's
we
really
alone
difficult.
in this anomaly? I'm
No.
just asking you.
No, I think it's just the nature of, and I'm not familiar with your infrastructure. Do you guys have manual meters that you pop it open and there's a wheel that says
Yeah.
4 numbers and that's
Yes.
what? Yeah. So there's a number of factors that can contribute to that. It could be
The handheld.
it could be them entering it in wrong. Hopefully, you have processes in place that mitigate the impacts of that, or that allow you to allow someone to catch if there are errors.
Well, what they're doing, they're putting door knockers on now for.
They are, because they said, here's the thing, the threshold was set at 150% or something like that for a
Of the-
bill.
yeah.
For a bill, and they lowered it now down to 20%. It's one of the first things that he did. But it is-
20%
Increase.
increase.
Oh,
Okay.
increase, or a
Or decrease.
difference.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. But
Okay.
before, it was like,
That's good.
yeah.
I think, you know, the infrastructure needs to be looked at. The metering, how often are we testing the meters as well? What kind of devices? Because from what I understand, some of these handheld devices have 6 buttons on them, some of them have 7 buttons on them, or what have you. Is it fat fingered, or what have you? What kind of bill pull do you have when you do get an anomaly? You know, is there some kind of red flag that goes up?
Is there somebody looking at it? Is
Right,
or is
to
it just you
manually,
enter it? Yeah,
mhm,
yeah.
to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So I think with, you know, the billing, and I think education too, as far as the training perspective, you know, what other information are these representatives getting training-wise to be able to speak to it, other than so sad, so bad, you know, it's a
Right.
leak and you're gonna have to, you know.
I think a
figure
lot.
this
Yeah,
out.
I think a lot of that really goes down to processes. It's
Right.
it's what do you have in place to say that, you know. I'll use Fort Lauderdale for example, because it's now a public report. You can go and read it. You know, do you have somebody? They have a person whose job it is to basically look at the what they call the exceptions on a daily basis, and that's the highs and the lows. To say, okay, this one looks very high. Let's have someone out and physically reread the meter the next day to see if that was put in an error.
Right.
You know, do those kind of process controls exist? And how's the city handling estimates when they aren't able to get a read? How are they doing that? You know, all those kind of things all
Right.
built in.
And I think, you know, for the call volume and everything else like that, forecasting, you know, is there any, from workforce management perspective, being able to forecast the number of calls that are coming in,
Yeah.
you know, on a daily basis?
And my
monthly?
guess is if you've got a new director who's been in there, you know, a couple months, he probably already knows a lot of the gaps that exist. You know, I think.
yeah.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, so I think he came in and probably identified a lot.
So let me ask you a quick
After I'll
question.
allow Brandy, you can chime in, okay?
So your time frame on all this is after 5 days after everything is kicked off, about 8 weeks, so 2 months to
Yep.
get the draft and final report.
Yep.
So you say everything altogether about 3 months to get everything said and done.
Yep. So once we get something signed from the city, we can be down and starting work. And I think one of the big differences between our initial scope and this one is just the amount of time for report writing. Because that's with those detailed reports, a lot of that time is just sit down, putting down dozens and hundreds of pages of paper. I think this will get you what you need in a more digestible format too, and we can do it in a shorter period of time. So our plan is, like I said, 8 weeks for the draft. Give it to you. We want to make sure that you and the city, I think, especially with when we're making observations, we want to make sure that we capture stuff right. So we want to make sure we're not going to just change something because they say to change it, but we want to make sure did we capture, especially when we're documenting a current state of how things are going. We want to make sure that we didn't capture something incorrectly.
So will some of that be translated into English for our commissioners and our mayor?
Absolutely, this will be at a level that's fair, and we'll include an executive summary that'll cover it. Yeah.
So, Matt, I'm going to recognize Brandy. Brandy is a citizen advocate. I hope I described you fine. And she's been very vocal on this topic
Okay.
for probably a year or more, I'm thinking.
About 3.
Yeah, so, okay, look at that. See how far off I am. So she's very active in this process, and she's got a lot of background. So
Okay.
I'd like to give her an opportunity to see
So
what she can
I have a lot of questions. One is actually for the committee because I guess somehow I missed the last meeting. Actually, I think I can address that with you later, if that's okay. The questions from last meeting.
Okay.
So on here, I'm looking at this sheet here.
Yep.
I had a few questions, preferably individually. So the first one, about how long do you plan on auditing it? Like, that's my breakdown, like time-wise. I see money, I see fee-wise, but time-wise, how much are we spending in each category?
It's difficult. This may not answer your question the way you'd like it to be answered, but I think there's a lot of overlap, particularly between things like customer service billing,
Oh, yeah.
human capital, and information. It's hard to be able to say, here is how much time we're going to spend on each of those because there's so much overlap. It's one department, but all these things are within every process that we look at. We're going to hit 3 or 4 or 5 of these buckets.
And how many people?
We've got a team. It'll be 3 to let's see, I think I put the names here.
Our names.
Full time, it'll be about 3.5 people.
And then contract for their support separately.
A lot of my concern obviously is going to come from the spending and the amount, obviously.
Understood.
Because we're self-funded.
Yeah.
And Deltona Water is self-funded. And by that, I mean by the residents, because we don't have a lot of commercial base. So I'm just a little concerned we might be spending time in areas that they may not need to look at. Here's why I'm saying that, is we already know in terms of water quality, yes, we have questions. I think you'd be going down a rabbit hole looking if we meet state quality standards or not. We get a report already. We meet it by their standards. Sometimes barely, but we meet it. My concern with maxing it out to the 200,000 is that it's an 8-week study. So I was just trying to get an idea. I see a lot of what is being said here, and I don't know how much background is actually given. I know you said you're going to sit with like the individuals in the floor level, and that's great.
I would also like to sit with the people in this room.
Okay, because
Is that-
I also, like I said, I think background is huge in this because we do have a huge history here of retaliation.
Sure.
So you're gonna probably hit some people that may not want to talk to you in an open and honest
Sure,
way.
absolutely, and we're familiar with that, and we you know, as I said earlier, we try to make sure that everyone knows we're not going to attribute any comments to any specific people. We're going to try to make things as open and straightforward as possible. But we also understand that people may not feel comfortable, but I do think, you know, and I think this group would be up for it. I'd love to have, you know, once we're under contract and you know, starting work, I'd love to have either individual sessions or a workshop with the people in this room as well to hear from you guys and hear your concerns as well as the people that we're talking to.
Let me, Brandy, 1 second. I'm going to get you right back. Hold on. Is what you're hearing and what you've heard through listening to the tapes, and is there an anomaly here that we're an outcast, or you're seeing similar things across the state or across the nation?
No, I think I would say that no. I'd say that there's not knowing the full history. So not knowing, like you said, retaliation,
That's what I'm saying, there's a lot you don't know.
not knowing specific things. I'd say you probably have more in common with other municipal organizations of this size, and utility departments of this size than you have anomalies.
There's
Those things
almost
you've dealt with already.
always some of those issues
And
in
especially
almost
the
every
fall.
system.
Yeah.
You know, water quality complaints because
When
you know,
the
this
city
area is-
owns, when the city owns the water department, right? That's
Yep.
where I'm trying, when the
Yep.
city owns it. Okay.
Or private. It doesn't,
Yeah.
it doesn't really
You see that
matter
too.
because these are fairly complicated things to do with chemicals and, you know, whether a system's looped or not. You
Yeah.
know, water may sit in that pipe for a long time if it's not being flushed.
Yeah.
If the practices aren't good, which affects the water quality. So there's a lot of.
So it's a lot
And I
more
would-
than just reading the state report.
Exactly.
She's really hitting the nail on the head. When I was making a comment that there's a lot of anger,
Mhm.
there's a tremendous amount of anger because all we ever hear
You gotta,
all the time is we have a leak.
Yeah.
Right, and here's our problem, is they're self-fixing leaks.
yeah.
And see, that's where the problem is. You can't go from having a leak and you pay thousands and thousands of dollars to find out there's no leak, and the next month your bill's back to normal.
Right.
There's no explanation on some of these bills. Now, the $20,000 bill you explained, we did find the error. It was manually inputted, they added a zero.
Yep.
Why didn't that flag?
Yep.
Why did a $20,000 bill go in the mail?
Yeah, that would hopefully, you know, by looking at the processes, we will be able to see, okay, you don't have a control that prevents that from happening. You don't have someone going out and confirming a read that where it's literally an order of magnitude 10 times higher than it should be.
And
That
see,
should
so
show
that's
up.
kind of where my concern is paying this amount of money to find out things we already know. You see what I'm saying? Like.
But do you know what that process looks like?
Well, see, and that's where the little tight lip comes in. It gets a little hard. You say that you're gonna get data from the city, but the city doesn't collect data. That's our problem.
Well,
So
we're
where
gonna be
would
we're gonna
you
be
get
watching
this
we're gonna
data
watch
from?
people do their work. We're gonna actually observe people and talk to them through and say, okay, here walk me through how you process a bill, when you get the data in, how does it go? That's the kind of thing that we're going to be doing.
Evaluate the processes.
Yeah.
And if there's no process for capturing those exceptions
Yep.
and investigating them before that bill goes
Which
out.
there's not, because we know
Right.
that.
So that's something that we would be pointing out. That's a flaw in the process.
But
Can you-
that's what I'm saying, so we're paying you to point out something we've already pointed
But,
out. So
what-
is there anything more?
I know where you're going. What I want to ask is this pointed question. Can you evaluate reports in Munis to look at the trend of the last year's water bills for people who have paid over a certain threshold? Can we point you to look or ask for that data? Because we've asked for data like that, a report out of Munis. Can you evaluate that to see
We
what
can
a
ask for that
trend-
data.
what a trend is? I mean,
I guess what
Brandy, am I
specific,
right?
what specific trend are you looking for?
So what we want to know is that in our city, people that we have talked to on a practical basis, sitting down a year and a half collecting data, okay? There are families, okay, of 4 that pay a $35 water bill on septic, okay? I'm just using it as an example, okay? Then you have a little old couple, right, who are at home, they do laundry maybe once a week or whatever. They get, for their water use, they're getting a bill of $200.
Okay.
So what we're trying to figure out is, we've been told the average water bill in Deltona is $70. I'm just throwing that number out there, $70. That's what we're told in general. When indeed, we don't have access to that data to say, no, the average water bill in Deltona is this. We're trying to find how many people's water bill has been over, say, $500, right? We would consider that an anomaly based on what we know to be household use, right? I don't know what that captured number is, what I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah.
What is the average number that people pay for the water bill? Where are the anomalies? We cannot get that information. If
So
you
that's my
see-
question, is how are they gonna
How are
get it
you-
if
'cause
it
it's
doesn't
in
exist?
Munis.
Well,
It's in Munis.
so one, we asked for that. If they can provide something like that, that's an observation right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
That tells us something that
You're
they
gonna
can,
have to get all new
So
systems.
you're
So,
trying to
but
get-
here's.
or just that they don't have the people who know how to
So
to
then-
manipulate
Extrapolate the data.
Yeah.
Okay, so then here's my question. You're relying on the data you're provided, correct?
Yes, we're not going to have Munis access. That's
Right, and there's no way to verify the data you're being given. Because you see, I've uncovered this. I will ask for data, I will get data, I will get my hands on the real data, and it doesn't match.
Okay.
So my concern is, you're saying, oh, we're gonna get all this data, city from the data. Well, so do I.
Mhm.
But it's not always accurate and truthful. So
Well, you
here's
could be
some more my
standing there,
concern.
I'm guessing, you could be standing there when that data is extrapolated. Is that part of a due process? If you stand there and you ask this
This is sticky, I'm telling
employee,
you, it's sticky.
well, here's the thing, can you tell me, if you're sitting there and you ask the employee, could you please run this report in Munis right now? Right, in real time, so that you know that you're getting that data, as opposed to handing them a list and say, I would like this data tomorrow or 3 days from now. I'm talking about being able to verify that you're pulling real data. And the reason I bring this up is that the temperature in the culture right now is so suspicious of the city, because so many people have had so many problems. We need that type of oversight and transparency when doing that. I don't need to be in the room, I don't need to see the data, but I need the person that I'm paying to see the data
So-
to see
Well,
the data.
I understand
How about
that.
the program that they run? Is it capable of being able to do that?
Munis should, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
So is it piecework though? In other words, like, we want the program, but we're not adding these little pieces to it to be able to extrapolate reports or what have
I
you?
think I'll bring this in also, that's what
Yeah.
I'm trying to do. It's important, data integrity is
Yes.
extremely
Sure.
important. So as you do your work, right, have an emphasis on data integrity, whatever you can do that
Sure.
maybe puts that to the highest level you've ever done within our scope, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of data integrity, so that we feel like you've really gotten to the meat and potatoes. That's basically what.
And that people are cognizant of that, because I want to be able to tell the people that have entrusted me with their issues, bringing the issues to this, and giving us their money. I want to be able to look them in the face and say, I know for a fact that this is the level of integrity of this data based on this. I just want to be able to answer to the people that have trusted us with their money.
Sure.
So,
The only thing I will say is, because I know there's a lot of concern about our fees and things like that.
Well, and I know it's an expensive job because I do auditing, so I know
Sure.
it's
No,
expensive.
Sure.
But again, like she said, we have people that are counting on us to answer that it's worth the money that we're paying.
I understand. And so what I'm getting at is I want to make sure that we are adding the most value for the fees that we're charging, and I want to make sure that, and we can talk about this, if it gets to this point, is having somebody from our team standing and watching somebody run a report an effective use of the fees that that we are.
Right, I mean, maybe it's not an effective use, but in the same thing, you're dealing with a system that may give you false data, and then so your answers are not gonna be legit.
No, and I
So then we
think
just
there's
do
I think there's a balance. I think there's a balance that we will work to get in terms of data integrity.
okay.
Yeah, that's why make it your highest priority.
Yeah.
It's very
So can I just assume that we're all on the same page as far as that? It's of equal importance to all of us.
Sure. Okay.
That,
Data
because
integrity, yeah.
that's
Okay.
where that's where I feel that some of the failures have been and I'm hoping that they can look and say, you know what I mean, what it is or what it's not.
Sure.
You might not be able to tell us what it is, but we're really depending on you to tell us what it's not.
Okay. To the
Yes.
extent that we can, but because I did say earlier, it's hard to prove a negative.
Yeah.
It's hard to prove that something.
As long as you're doing your due diligence.
That's why I wrap it around data integrity is the
Yeah.
highest priority. So
Yeah, it's hard to prove that there isn't a leak if we aren't the ones going out and looking like that.
I just think it's
Yeah.
important that
gonna go
when this is said and done, we paid this, look, a lot of us, we're not allowed of debt in the city, and we want to add more debt unnecessarily.
Sure.
So as long as people know that whatever information we get is something that has integrity,
Mhm.
that it wasn't, as Brandy is pointing out, it wasn't fluffed or changed or manipulated to reflect something in somebody else's favor.
Yeah.
You're the third party. You're the one that's supposed to remain neutral.
Yep.
I think it will help give the residents a peace of mind,
Yep.
and that's what
Sure.
this group they formed for,
Yeah.
was to give the residents a peace of mind. And listen, if whatever comes out of the report is not very positive for the city, well then let's do stuff to correct it.
Yeah, and I will say, so one other thing is, I do think that just because of, given the scope of what's going on, I think that data is, I think there's going to be a combination when you do a report like this, or a study like this, that's a combination of observations and data analysis. I think this one is very heavy on observing and talking and understanding how operations are. I think data analysis plays a role in that, but I think I think more so than anything, it really just kind of augments what we're already going to be looking at, if that makes sense. Not saying not saying we're not doing a data analysis and it's not
I'm gonna
important.
go.
Oh, no.
I'm gonna go to the gentleman back there. Can you just state your name for the record if you don't
My name
mind?
is Dave.
Dave?
Yeah, Dave Charles.
James Charles.
Regarding to data integrity, I wanted to know when you guys will be going and providing the data or retrieving the data, will you guys be within that time span of observing or providing the data, will you guys be getting like week 1, pull that report, week 4, pull that report, week 8, pull that report to see the difference between the data, accurate or not?
Typically what we will do is we'll do a point in time. So, and particularly because this is such this is a fairly short engagement, we would typically do some that are, 3 to 5 months. This will be essentially in 2 months. What we'll do is we can do 1 year, 3 year, we can define what that looks like, but we get, okay, give us X data set. So if it's give us all the customer data or the bills, bill data, consumption data, all that for the last 12 months ending September 30th. And that's the data set that we use. You can see the trends within there. You can do 3 years, you can do 1 year, depending on what you're looking at. Sometimes 1 month is good, or 1 year is good. Sometimes 3 years better. But typically we'll find one set in time, and just for the purposes of this kind of study, that would typically be what you're looking at, if that makes sense. With Fort Lauderdale, we did 3 years because we were looking at very detailed billing data. We were laser focused on every single step of that water metering and billing process. So we did a full 3 years of history.
Thank you. Thank you for asking the question. Do you have something else, Brandy?
Yeah, I just wanted to finish going down the list.
Go ahead.
On the financial planning and management, what is the idea, like, what is your plan on looking in there? Like, I guess I just want to know, like, what your steps are, what your plan is on how you plan to audit some of these categories, if that makes sense.
Well, I think so. So they'll be. This will be different, most likely, than the other ones. The other ones are, as I said, are more kind of looking at the steps in the process. This isn't necessarily as much a process as it is kind of understanding the finance. I think what we said earlier is I think we've already answered it to a certain degree. Is that 25%? In line with what other municipalities are doing, and B, looking at, as he said earlier, the fiscal impact if there's any changes. I think that one's a fairly straightforward one. It's really
Narrow
just
just
data
to that.
analysis and yeah.
That's the 25%.
Right. Are they aware of the bad swaption deal that put us here?
No.
Okay.
No.
'Cause these are the kind of things I think they should give in a packet on, because I don't want them to go down a trail that they don't need.
And I
You
think
know,
that
like,
early
we
on in the
did that
process,
swaption deal, we lost our ass.
yeah, and early on in the process, we'd be talking to obviously the city, but we would again talk to the people in this room to understand that background.
And she means people in this room, Randy.
Yeah, there's no way I'm leaving you out.
So I think that kind of, and like I said, the only reason I had this question is because it is such a small amount of time,
Yeah.
and I'm like, wow, how are you going to do this in that amount of time? Because that's a tiny amount of time
Yeah.
to do like a.
Well, I just wanted to bring to mind too, okay, that we do, as we narrow, right, when we bring them on based on this and they sit down, to keep it out there, that it is, I think it's pretty much going to be, if I'm not mistaken, our choice or the city's choice to move forward with a deeper dive. And I think the eyes are going to be on them. It's going to be up to y'all whether, you know what I mean, they do a deeper dive or not. We are the ones, and when I say that, I mean the residents are the one who have brought this process this far. The residents wanted this, they brought it forward, the city, and for whatever their motivations, and I'm not implying it was a bad motivation, but what I'm saying, whatever their motivations are, move forward with this also. And I think that we be good to remember that if we need to do a deeper dive, right, that we do a deeper dive. It's going to be up to y'all, and when I say y'all, I mean, it's going to be up to y'all out there listening, right, if that's what you want for your city. This is only the beginning of the kind of control that the residents have taken back to say that we want answers, and I want us to remember that we're empowered here.
And I think to build on what you're talking about with the deeper dive, that's actually how the Charlotte County one was structured and why it was a little bit more expensive. The approach, and I wasn't involved at the very beginning of that project, but essentially the approach was they did an initial kind of essentially risk assessment of kind of similar functions. So like, here's all the functions we want you to look at, pull out kind of the key risk areas, and then they represented those and said, here's the areas we think you should do a deeper dive in. And so that when it's a couple, a few $100,000 more, that's because we went in and did that really deeper dive to really get in at a really fine level of detail.
And you make that recommendation at the end of this. Do you make that recommendation for a deeper dive?
It would depend. I'm not going to say what we will or will not recommend because it's going to depend on what we find.
I
There will
got
be
you.
some stuff that I would say. I mean, I think the key thing is we want to have actionable recommendations.
Right.
So if it's something the city can do on its own
Right.
or doesn't require a deep dive, we're going to say that.
We want
if there's
that.
something that said you should go, you should go do this because our scope is limited and we couldn't just get to every single level of detail to really hone in on the specifics of it, we'll recommend that as well. It doesn't necessarily mean that we are going to be the ones to do it. We don't necessarily expect you to hire us to do it. We think that if there's something within IT that says you need to go through and audit XYZ, we're going to point that out.
And I think it's important to understand why the 25% comes in such questions, is they don't actually have representation here in the city. They don't have a commissioner they can go to or anything like that. And I know 25% is typical. I mean, I did the research myself. It is a typical fee. But I guess their question is it necessary to go to 25% when you're not really providing?
Just because you can doesn't mean you
service.
should, and that's
Correct.
where we're at. Just
And
because
you're
you
going to give us
can.
just the fiscal impact with those
Yeah.
numbers, and
Yeah.
then they can go from there.
Yeah.
We're gonna,
May I
we got to
interject?
slowly start coming into a close here, okay?
Do you know a lot about the smart meter system?
Quite a bit.
Yeah.
We just put in a lot of them in some of our systems that we manage. So pretty expensive.
Are they?
Very.
Yeah. How many customers do you have, or how many accounts?
33,000.
33,000. So you're about half as much as for one of them.
But how effective are they versus the old meters?
Very good. Depends on what you determine, what you, what
Well, they
is
get so
effective
many
means.
capabilities.
Well, plus you gotta remember, you're also gonna save costs because they don't have to pay someone now to go around.
That's what I'm.
I
trying to
would
get
not,
to.
I would not do it as a cost savings
That's right.
exercise.
I-
It is significantly more expensive.
More
to
accuracy.
implement, but you're more accurate and you have more
Accuracy
visibility.
is what's going to come from it.
You guys are concerned about high bills. Generally, meters don't read high.
Yep.
No, they slow down.
They slow down.
They get slower.
Yep.
So you
where
go
our
put in
question
new
comes from.
meters and guess what? You get higher bills.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's generally what happens.
Careful what you ask for, Tim.
Yeah.
It might be.
Which actually happened if
200
someone asked for a new meter in her building.
Yeah,
pretty
that's-
No, but I think that Deltona Water should be looking at meters and just testing them to make sure that they're accurate,
I want
you
as
know,
much
on an
calcium
annual
buildup in
basis.
my meter as possible.
What'd you say?
I want as much calcium buildup in my meter.
I just have one last question, because I saw some questions about the sewer on here. And maybe you can answer it as just a typical, you've done these studies before. Do you typically see sewer rates charged at the same rate as the water going out? So like if I'm billed 56,000 gallons come in, they also bill me 56,000 gallons going
If
out.
you're
But
not on the irrigation meter?
scientifically, you know, that's impossible.
Usually
There's
a
usually a
cap
cap. Yeah.
on sewer.
So it's like
10,000 gallons.
10,000, 20,000.
But you'll look at that.
And then, yeah, and if,
that's
well, we're not going to do a comparison, because Stantec just did that for you.
And that's
They-
a rate study.
Right,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
right, no, that's what I'm trying to say. I don't want
Yeah.
rabbit holes of things
Yes.
that we already have answers
Exactly,
to.
exactly. I think the key thing that we would kind of point out, it's not necessarily a recommendation, it's just something that it's the use of irrigation meters and how that can impact.
I was wondering if you had to have two meters, like one for the
You don't have to, but it reduces your cost from a with domestic water to irrigation.
Do they allow you to have an irrigation meter?
They do charge you if you want a second meter, so what I was trying to explain to her is that sometimes you have to see if that's cost effective. I mean, if you don't do a whole
It's
lot
a cost
of
outlay.
irrigation.
Yeah.
pay
But if
less
you're
than
but if you're
a
running
meter.
20,000 gallons a month and 15 of that is irrigation,
I
it'll
don't
pay
do a
off.
lot of irrigation, but my irrigation is a lot more expensive than my water. And that's what I don't understand.
Do you have 2 meters?
Yes.
Uh-huh. And I don't understand why reclaim
Do you know how many gallons you're doing?
No, I don't
Okay.
remember.
That may be
But-
why
Yeah.
you're using
But I
so
was-
much more.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's
I'm
just
not.
her.
It's just me, yeah.
But you're just, so if it's just you in the house, you're probably only doing 2,000 or 3,000 gallons a month of domestic, and you're probably doing a fair amount of irrigation.
Can
Twice a week.
you do 2 things for me? State your name for the record, and can you get us a copy of your bill? You
Yeah.
can just take out the thing and
Yeah.
give it to Dane or somebody, and we'll look at it there. Okay, can you
Yeah.
just state your name, because we have
Kara
25%.
Kara,
Carol Daniel?
C-A-R-R-A, Kara.
Thank you, I appreciate
Kara
it.
O'Shea.
Let's look at it, let's look at
That's
the
what I
details.
don't, I mean, I have no real objection to the amount of water I'm being charged, because I know it is expensive here.
Right.
But for the irrigation to be so expensive or more than the regular water, it just doesn't make sense to me. And then
Yeah.
wanting to go up that much more. what
My
are they
guess
gonna
is it's
do
just
with all the
consumption,
extra
but
money?
we'll take. If you since you were kind enough to come out, if you'll take a look at, we'll take an initial look at it. But yeah,
Okay. Well, I'll give it to Tim.
yeah.
All right. Okay. All right, I think we're good. Matt, thank you very much for presenting. Members of the audience, thank you for presenting. One last piece of business. Does the committee want to have any discussion, or are you prepared to make the recommendation to the city commission for them to engage KPMG?
As long as I think that they sit down like Brandy advised, so we can get all the background to them,
Absolutely.
I'm ready, I'm good to go.
Tim, you good?
I just have one question I didn't get the chance to ask. That how do you work with reluctant employees? Because to pull information out in a focus group is not. I don't know if this is the right city for that because of the past history of it. So how are you actually going to?
It's one of the more difficult parts of a project like this, especially with what it sounds like the culture might be. I think it's one you try to find the people who are willing to talk and listen to them. I think it's just being patient. Honestly, it's literally just asking questions. If they give you one-word answers, it's continue asking questions, trying to find that piece of common ground that gets them to open up or allows them to be more open. And it's also kind of having a smell test when you're listening to a response. There have been people who have lied to my face when I've interviewed them, and what you have to do is you have to interview multiple people and
Focus
figure out what
groups
things
and
are going.
one-on-ones to put
Yeah,
it-
yeah, it's a combination. You know, depending on what the function is, depending on what the employee structure is, how many there are. Do you want to focus on just interviewing one or two as they do their job, or do you want to get them all together to kind of bounce things around? Depending on the culture and how things are, there's different ways to go about it.
It helps to focus on the process too,
Yeah.
so that they don't feel like you're focusing on them.
Yes,
They're
yes.
being indicted, and
Yeah.
you're trying to understand the processes that they're using.
And it's
pointing out-
twofold. When you've got poor morale and they see somebody's here to make something different and make it better, sometimes they're a little bit more forthcoming and wanting to say, this is what we do now, but they may have ideas or what have you to say, but we miss this, or
Some people do feel threatened.
Yeah.
and they
Has
do.
everybody seen
It's
the movie
twofold.
Office Space?
Yeah.
All right. So I always make sure that I make people know I'm not the Bobs, because they see us come in, they see auditor, they see KPMG, they think we're here to say you need to fire him, you need to fire her, you need to fire him. I'd come in and say, we're not here to do anything like that. We're not here to say make any staffing recommendations. We're not here to get anybody in trouble. We're trying to find ways to make your job help do your job better and make you more productive and all that.
So the folks-
and that makes people relax a lot. That's the first thing I always say in an interview.
The folks that are going to be coming here and working in here on the audit, what are their backgrounds? What's their qualifications in order to be able to do this?
Sure. So I'll speak to the KPMG side, and you can speak to the GSG side. So I've been doing this for 8 years. We have a combination of people depending on their backgrounds, but we have people who have finance degrees. We have people who have our former state auditors. I think the staff member that we'll likely use, depending on when this actually starts, was a member of the State of Georgia Department of Audits and Accounts who did performance audits for a living before he joined the firm. Our partner, Roger Albritton, the partner on this project, actually started out his career as an accountant within water and wastewater. So all of those kind of credentialize us, and you can speak to GSG.
Yeah, and on the operations side, we'd be bringing people in who are 30-year operators, that have run every kind of plant, that you can imagine. That would go in and try to understand the processes, because it's a big chemistry project, right, in these water and wastewater plants. And so we got guys with credibility that know it. We got professional engineers, former utility managers.
Will they point out any deficiencies in the sewer system? Because I see a lot in the state of Florida about sewage leaks. That's kind of...
Well, leaks are a different thing, because
Okay.
leaks a lot of times are in pipes in the ground that nobody knows it's leaking until it rises to the surface somewhere.
That's a deep
So
dive.
Yeah.
That's not what we're looking at.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're primarily looking at the treatment processes, right?
Right.
Okay, what
Right.
you're doing, and
Yeah, John will have to take a look at our infrastructure and see what's going on.
Yeah, he's diving in wastewater.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I point out is it seems like, especially because we're of who this group is and why you've been put together, a lot of the stuff we're going to focus on. It's not that sewer leaks aren't important. I think a lot of these are really your customer touching programs.
Yes.
And I think we want to keep the customer at the top of mind and
Absolutely.
prioritize that with what we look at.
That's what drove us being here.
Great follow-up question. Are you going to be able to reach out to any Deltona Water customers and conduct any kind of customer survey? Is that...
That's it. That we could potentially do that. I'd have to look at the best way to do that, whether that's through a survey, whether that's through a. We do have a survey tool, and we've done that. It's very easy to put together. If that's something that you'd be interested in, we could do that. It would be here's the thing. It would be most likely. It would almost certainly have to be online. We're not going to be able, just because hand checking manual responses is just.
Can you get back to me next week on that?
Yeah, I can commit. We can include that because it's fairly easy to put together. We can commit to including that.
Let's do that.
Survey monkey.
Let's do it.
We have to. Unfortunately, we have like a proprietary one we have to use, but it'll work.
Let's do that. Let's do that. All right, we've got another committee getting ready to start.
Good.
Without no other comments, somebody made a motion that we can to approve, send it to the city commission meeting. Send it to the city commission.
I make the motion to approve and send it to the commission.
Second.
All right, those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, I'll be talking to the staff tomorrow, and then they'll schedule the process for them to contract you guys.
Great.
As long as they approve.
As long as they approve, understood.
Thank you, we're adjourned. Thank you for coming. 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 Thank you for